Hey, welcome back to Psych Your Way to Success. I am Claire, your host, along with
Heather Fife.
and today we are excited to have Mr. James Grigsby with us, who is going to talk about himself real quick. And if you don't mind, James, do you mind giving us your elevator speech? What do you do? What are you doing now?
Yeah,
All of that fun stuff.
happy to. So I met you at Harvard, and so
Yes.
currently I'm graduating from that, walking in a couple of months, and then I work in human resources at Seattle Colleges, and am also a credentialed drug and alcohol counselor. And so I actually still practice doing that at least once a week, usually more than that. And I guess retired chef, recovering from the restaurant
Yeah.
industry, whatever you want to call it. Yeah,
I think a recovering chef is definitely a better way
exactly.
of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I still do a bit of consulting with the restaurant industry and train and certify chefs and restaurant owners in compliance and food safety.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Every time I learn something new about you too. So yeah, a little background. James and I had the opportunity to work together in class on an on-campus in Harvard at Harvard.
Yeah.
Um, Loads of fun, negotiations, conflict resolution.
Oh, I
Really
love
great
that
course.
class.
Yeah, super great. Actually, somebody we know, Lauren, we all know Lauren, so that's another really great person to. Anyway, so sidetracked. Speaking of rabbit holes, today James is more or less an expert when it comes to burnout, being able to recognize it, being able to kind of see some warning signs. And I think before we super deep dive into that, my first question to you is, what is it? How do you define burnout in the workplace? So what does that look like, and how do you define it so we're all on the same page?
Probably the best way to define it would be differentiating it from stress. I think that's something that often gets
Yes.
it's a good frame of reference and point of comparison, and can sometimes get conflated with it. And so stress being situational and fleeting. It comes and it goes depending on the circumstances. Burnout is that enduring, persistent, I got nothing left in the tank. And so it's really characterized by that feeling of hopelessness, helplessness. There's no end of the tunnel to get to even see the light. And so
Yeah.
it is all encompassing. And yeah, persistent, I would say, would be one of the biggest characteristics.
That's fantastic. It's a really good, like, that hopelessness, helplessness. I think when I think of my burnout moments, there
Yeah.
was definitely no light at the end of the tunnel for me. So I think this is something that still really hits hard for everybody in the workforce right now. But I would love to hear what you have as far as, you know, are you teaching people like the ways to look out for burnout? What does that look like for you, even in an HR role?
Yeah. So I took an abnormal path to HR in a world surrounded by a lot of attorneys and folks with just straight up pure HR backgrounds. I am an addiction counselor that stumbled his way into HR. And so
It is a
burnout is,
unique path.
thank you. I like it.
Yes.
Burnout is something that, having worked in the drug and alcohol industry, is huge in that field. And I found it's also huge everywhere, really. And so what I do with it and why it's important to me is I see so many factors and characteristics burning people out that are avoidable, whether it's recognizing it, becoming more resilient to it, doing something to reverse the effects of it, poor management practices. I mean, so much of everything. They say you don't quit your job, you quit your boss. It's like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so how do
Oh,
we make
absolutely.
bosses that people don't quit and get burnt out from? And so having taken that path into HR, so much of it really is, I want people not be miserable in their jobs and dragging themselves to work, because it doesn't stay in a vacuum or isolated at work. It comes home to your kids, to your pets, to your friends, family, and the isolation, it affects everything. And so I don't know, I want to be able to make a difference there. And so what do I do with it? I've facilitated several workplace trainings regarding that. I am also going to be doing a seminar for continuing education credits for other
Awesome.
drug and alcohol counselors. We have to get, 20 every 2 years, I believe. And so working with an old professor of mine from Bellevue College down here, that leading seminar with that and having other drug and alcohol counselors come and knock out 4 hours of credentialing.
That is awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Heather, I didn't know. I know you have some questions, so I didn't want to take it all.
I know. Well, I was just curious because I think sometimes the hardest part with burnout is actually recognizing it. And I know that you mentioned recognizing it. How do you find that either as a leader or as a friend, how you can help someone recognize it? Because I think it's hard for me to recognize when I'm feeling burned out. Because you
Until
go,
it's
go,
too
go, go.
late.
Well, honestly, because we all live in a world where there's so much to do, there's so many places to be, there's, a
Well,
lot
and
at our attention.
we almost reward burnout. We reward the path that it takes to get to burnout quite
We,
often, don't we?
I, yeah, I mean, it feels
Yeah,
like it.
I think so.
Well, I think also you see it, this interesting ego surrounding that kind of stuff. Where it's like, oh, you slept four
Mhm.
hours last night. Well, I slept two. Look at me. And
So right.
no self care. You're harming yourself. Why are you bragging about this? So it is in many ways something that is rewarded and that people are proud of. And at the end of the day, I don't live to work. I work so that way I can live and exist and like be there
Hmm.
for my kid. So how do you go about recognizing it? I think a lot of it has to do with self awareness. So what is your norm? Am I still getting enjoyment out of things that I do? If I really knock something out of the park at work, do I feel something, anything at all?
Yeah.
Yeah. Am I feeling proud of my accomplishments? Do I feel like the work that I'm doing has meaning? Is it rewarding to me? Am I more cynical or irritable? When's the last time I saw my friends? Am I putting on music when I get in my car? Little things like that. All right, I got a real good one. A real big warning sign for me when I'm burnt out. How many unheard voicemails do I have on my phone?
And for me, it's the music in the car. If I'm not turning on some kind of music, 100% of the time I'm like, oh, there's too much going on in my world right now. What's going on?
Yeah.
Like it's my that's my warning bells. Do you have one other that you're aware of?
I would say it's when I don't feel like working out or going to do yoga or like something that I love doing. Like
Mm-hmm.
I know that that's when I am struggling.
Yeah,
Hmm. I think that's a really good one too.
it
That's really
is.
interesting.
Yeah, like I can't get myself to go to yoga and I love it. Like
Which
yeah,
makes it so hard to address because all of those things are the things that we need to do in order to reverse it, right? The
right.
last thing I want to do when I'm feeling burnt out is go and do yoga or exercise or what have you. And the moment I do, I mean, I'm 30 seconds in, it's like, oh, I feel great about myself. And like you feel the weight and the brain fog and everything start to lift. And so
Yeah.
yeah, it's a bit of a catch 22.
It's almost like it reminds me of when I don't realize I'm hungry until I have the first bite of food and then I'm ravenous. Because you haven't eaten in so long and all of a sudden you're just like, oh, I did not even realize that I was this hungry until just now. That's
Absolutely.
really funny.
Yeah.
Um, when, like, in the experience that you've had, especially in HR, I think that's such a great position to be able to speak into burnout. Are there any things that you've seen as like short-term and long-term effects of burnout that you're seeing in the workforce? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, it really varies from person to person. But so, I mean, I have been burnt out. I think most people have. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'll speak to my own experience with it. The biggest wake up call for me was a few years back. I was driving my daughter home from school and she goes, Daddy, are you mad at me? And I go, no, of course not. I'm like, what's going on, sweetheart? She goes, well, you just seem just irritated all the time. It's like, all right, something is very wrong. And
Oh,
so
interesting.
that irritability, that not being who you want to be for your friends and family members, gaining weight, losing weight, um,
Mm-hmm.
changes in appetite, avoidant behavior, not spending as much time around friends,
Yeah.
falling behind on schoolwork, right? I mean, that's another one, right? As you know, I'm
Oh my
wrapping up
God.
school right now, and uh, when the burnout really gets bad. Hi, Miso. When the burnout really gets rough, I find that I just stop caring as much. Right? Why? What's the point in anything? That hopelessness that we were talking about before. The school assignments start to suffer. The work assignments start to suffer,
Yep.
and friends, family. It affects everything. But
Hmm.
those are some key ones that really stand out.
But how does that differ from stress? Because I understand the hopelessness, but sometimes some of these things also are caused from just stress. So is it like a time thing where you're
I would
like,
say
do
one
I
thing.
feel hopeless every day? I don't know.
Yeah. Uh, I would say a lot of it really is the time thing and just how fleeting it is. And when I'm doing trainings on it, actually, a key differentiating factor with it would be with stress, it's almost heightened emotionality, right? Like
Hmm.
I'm frustrated. I have a short fuse, whereas when I'm burnt out, it's like I got nothing left to give. It's more apathetic and blunted, muted emotions. And yeah, the time aspect, right? Being stressed out, there are circumstances where it makes sense to be stressed out, right? Sitting in traffic,
Hmm.
having a deadline looming over me, or I don't know, going through a divorce or something, like those situations where, yeah, of course it's stressful, but there's a path through. Whereas with the burnout, it's, oh, I've been stressed for, I don't know, 5 years straight, and this is the only life I know. I don't have the willpower left to fight at that point. And so I think, yeah, that dull, muted emotions would be a key difference there.
That's a great point. And I would even say like stress is a symptom, but not the diagnosis, right? Like if you're looking at long term, like chronic stress would equal burnout
Yeah.
almost, right? Like if we think, I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure it out.
I mean,
In
they're definitely related.
psychology, what's that? Yeah, certainly related. Yeah. In psychology, we have that clinical psychology, psychopathology course.
Mhm.
And it has the DSM, and the DSM shows us that like that path. And according to this is like in order to have PTSD, right? You have to have prolonged and a very specific amount of time. I wonder if they'll ever come up with anything like that when it comes to burnout, like a suspended amount of time under duress of some
Yeah.
sort, like or stress, whatever the case may be. I'm curious.
I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to see stuff like that come up for workplace specific situations so that people in HR management roles, things like that would have a tangible for many of you guys that can't see it, you shouldn't push her down. She's going to just keep doing the same thing. James's cat is like really just wanting the limelight right now, so it's really kind of cute. There she is. Okay. And that's how you de-stress. Yes.
Acceptance is the answer. There it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, I would love to see something like that come into the workplace because I know that we have these boundaries, these guidelines, these bumpers, more or less, that really help people define what that looks like in everyday life. But even within a workplace, I think that could be very helpful.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It is a newer term. I'm sure it's not necessarily a newer phenomenon, but putting
Yeah.
words to it and labeling it. I mean, it's what was it, like the 70s? Hold on, I've done enough of these trainings. I
I,
can do this from
I
memory.
was like, when did it?
All right. 1975, psychologist Herbert Freudenberger coined the term working in a free health clinic in New York City, noticing that several of his peers, so social workers, nurses, medical professionals, despite caring deeply and being passionate about the work they were doing, that's what brought them into the field, their quality of work and overall well-being as people in and outside of work started diminishing, and trying to figure
Wow.
out what's going on with that, he coined the term burnout.
That
Hmm.
is interesting. So since the 70s, we've
Mhm.
been aware of it, but we have not focused on it as far as part of a resolution until I would say recently. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it almost seems like to me that burnout came really to the forefront during COVID. Where
Okay.
Absolutely.
people,
Yeah.
that's what I think, because then all of a sudden you were able to just like you saw how you were burned out or how things were causing burnout. Especially because I think these Zoom calls, they're harder. They're harder on your mental health than you would think. You know?
It's like being on stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't they I know that I'm speaking out of school in some respects when it comes to this because I didn't do a lot of it, but even people were saying that having their camera on stressed them out too much when they were having Zoom meetings, and those were the only meetings that were available due to COVID. And so a lot of people were not even being on camera to avoid certain levels of stress and burnout. Did you guys see the same thing?
I mean, I saw quite a bit of it. When
Mm.
COVID first hit, I was still working in the treatment industry, and so we had to adapt
Oh,
to so much of drug and alcohol recovery being on Zoom. And yeah, Zoom fatigue is a term I've heard a lot. And
yeah.
I think both being on camera and depending on comfort with the technology and being able to utilize that, or if it's frustrating, why is it playing out of the monitor speakers instead of the computer speakers, and like everything that comes with that. I think it can definitely be frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about so in teams, when we're working in teams, I'm just going to throw
Mhm.
that out there. It was one of the things we kind of mentioned we would talk about, like when it comes to teams, is there something that we can be looking at with our colleagues or even as mentors, or if we're just working with people even not being on their team, do you see things that are pretty pronounced that we often look at and say that's none of my business, I'm not going to bother them, that we should maybe be aware of, that we
Hmm.
do you, am I making sense? I know it can be so hard for me to communicate, but
I follow what you're saying. It's almost like warning signs that we should be vigilant of and notice in the people around us. And is it appropriate to say something? I think it really depends on the person and the relationship that we have with them. But as leaders,
mhm,
it's important to build that type of relationship where ideally I don't have to be the one approaching them. They're approaching me and going, "Hey, I'm really not doing so hot today. Do you mind if I take a step back?" And creating that environment where they feel okay doing that. But also,
mhm.
yeah, having that rapport where I can go, "Hey, what's going on? You seem, a little more irritable than usual today or something." And having enough of a relationship where somebody's not going to be wildly offended by that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you encountered a space or a time when you've had to do that?
I mean, I'm
Not to
sure
put
I've
you on
had
the spot.
plenty. Yeah, I'm sure I've had plenty, but almost like a job interview, right? The moment's like, think of a specific time, like,
Yeah.
oh, I got nothing. What is
Nothing.
coming to mind though is uh, an old supervisor of mine used to insist that after folks would go on vacation and whatnot, like when I would go on campus for the weekend,
Mhm.
that I would block off my entire calendar for the next day that I would be back at work, where I would still be there and working, but no Zoom meetings, no calls, no nothing like that that would put that imposition on my time. Instead, that time to ground and settle back into work and figure out, all right, what's going on around here again? And
Huh.
I really like that approach. It's like I'm still doing work and I've got things to catch up on, but being able to do it at my pace and adjust back to the time zone, for example.
That's awesome. And emails, of course. Like the dreaded it's vacations are wonderful until you realize what you're coming back to when it comes to emails.
All I want in the world is the AI to get good enough to just read my email for me. That is all I want from the technology.
Yeah, we were talking pre-show about AI and how much we're all using ChatGPT in this world right now. And if anything, I think you just said it. I would love for AI to be the ones that are replying to all of my emails.
Yeah.
Miss
Email
Heather?
brings up. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
please, Miss Heather.
I was like,
I'm just enjoying this whole conversation. I like that idea of when you get back from vacation that your whole day is just blocked off.
yeah.
I think that that makes a lot of sense because the biggest complaint I had with employees was like they didn't want to go on vacation because what happens when they get back? And there's not really an allowance. You're just like, you go on vacation, you have this great time, you're relaxing, you're having all this fun, and then you go back into work that next day. And it's like, it feels like a fire hose gets like,
Yep.
thrown at you because you're just trying to like take in everything that happened that last week, catch up on emails, like you're saying, and responding to people and talking to people and not being, um, and being kind to everybody that you haven't seen for a week. It's just,
Hmm.
it can be a lot.
Well, and are we creating an environment where people can actually put down their work email for a week? Or are they still going to be taking those calls and answering those quick questions while they're out of town from their phone? And when they come back, is it going to now be 2 weeks worth of work that I have to do to play catch up? Or are
Hmm.
there stop gaps that allow the projects to continue, or somebody is covering this, and I can have faith in my team that this will be covered while I'm out and I'm not going to be buried when I come back?
That is such a great point. Sorry, go for it, Heather.
No, no, I was just going to say, I think that is a good point because I, I'm going back to COVID because I think a lot of things kind of changed during COVID when now everybody's working from home and it became normal to just run and pick up your kids or do this or hang out with your kids for a little bit and then go back to work. But what
Hmm.
was hard was not working all the time, and like, even though you're physically home, you're presently like on your phone or on your computer or half doing everything. Um, I found it hard to go back to just being at home.
Yeah. Where you
I don't know
weren't
if
feeling
anybody else.
obligated to work and like diving in. And the second I see my computer and I hear a ding, like I'm running over to check on it, or my watch, because it's all interconnected. My watch tells me I got another work email and I'm instantly going to reply at midnight because I happened to get up for water. Like
Yeah.
I find it interesting because I hear a lot from people that who are burnt out, and it's so clear and it's so evident, and they're like, I'm like, take time. You have how many days? Like, look at how much time you have saved up. That might give you a nice read on whether or not you're getting burned out sometimes too. Like, if you have 3 years saved up for time off, right? Like, check in on
That's a
people.
warning sign you should look at in your peers, by the way. How much PTO do they have?
You know what?
Exactly.
I actually have something to say about that because it
Yeah.
is kind of fascinating. I have found that people, especially people who aren't married or don't have kids, or maybe they just got a divorce or whatever it is, right? There's so many options. Um, that they're kind of using work as their family. And
Hmm.
so it's not necessarily like they don't actually want to have like a life outside of work. Like it's, am I making any sense? I've seen it
Yeah.
so much lately where people use work as this is what I'm doing. And all your friends are your work friends. Like, even if you're going to go out to grab a drink or go have dinner, you're going with your work friends. And it's
Hmm.
really hard to turn it from work to there's almost no separation anymore.
Yeah.
I've seen more and more people be like that. So I'm just curious. Like, I wouldn't want to, if it was my quote unquote family, I'm fine not taking time off. I want to hang out with these people. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know. I'm just so curious about that new phenomenon that I'm seeing more and more and more lately, where we create these cultures, which is awesome. Like, that's what we want to do, create these great work family cultures. But then there's no like, okay, this is my work and this is my personal life. It's just kind of all the same.
Right.
I think all of that really goes into boundaries, right? Which is probably, I guess, if we're
Hmm.
looking at the resilience and preventing burnout on the forefront, it is those boundaries. And so, whether it's working from home, the biggest advice I always give people is differentiate it. Right. So
Hmm.
this area that I'm in is a segmented off portion of my living room that I have all my work stuff in, and when I'm not working, I don't go in here. and I don't bring my work stuff into other parts of the house. So I'm not bringing it out into the living room. If I'm watching TV with my kid, I'm not going to pull out the work laptop. And having some sort of ritual to even tell your mind and your body that you're off of work is really useful.
Mm-hmm.
Go walk a lap around the house, or put on work clothes when you're working and change into a different outfit, or taking a shower, or something that gives you that mental cue that you would otherwise have, when you close your office door and get in your car, or hop
Mm-hmm.
on the train or what have you, and commute home. Having something to replicate that, I think, is really useful. And with regards to the work friendships and the work uh, replacing family, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with being friends with people that you work with, but I I like using different communication platforms depending on the nature of my interaction with them. So if it's a work one, I might be sending messages over Microsoft Teams. Whereas if they're getting a text from me, now it's James as your friend reaching out to you. And so that distinction and compartmentalizing like that, I think, can be really useful.
That is a great point. The compartmentalization of each one of those aspects, I think, is so detrimental and beneficial. Like if you're not doing it, it's detrimental. I love the idea of like even change your clothes to like indicate and tell yourself, like, I'm officially off work. I'm going to go do this now. And even if it's, for a lot of people, they're like, oh, just go into a different room. And I'm like, do you know how many people cannot go into it? Like, there's not the luxury of being able to go into another room, right? Like, my desk is in my room for going to school, doing my work, everything. But that changing of the clothes, or even walking outside and walking the dogs, to tell my brain and tell my whole body, basically, like, that's it. Work is done. Now we're moving on. That's awesome. I love it. That's a great tip. That's the one I'm taking away. So,
I like that. I think, I mean, I definitely don't have a spare room. So finding
yeah.
ways, even visual cues that compartmentalize it, right? So I've got, like,
Mhm.
I don't know, pop up little divider that I got off of Amazon once upon a time to just put a barrier there for me. But
Yeah,
yeah, to whatever extent you can, right?
sure.
Modify it as applicable. But yeah, I think ways of compartmentalizing, literally and figuratively.
Yes. No, that works out really well. Um, Heather, I think you just, oh, sorry, you look like you had a question. So I wanted to check in with you.
Well,
Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm curious about this. You don't quit your job, you quit your boss.
Mm-hmm.
Ah,
That we
yes.
kind of talked about before. Um, when you're saying that, because I always think it's like more of a culture thing, but you can have a negative boss or not a great situation. And maybe not, it's not even the boss, it's just the ability for people to get along with each other. So when you have two personalities that just don't get along, that causes burnout and stress. How do you see people when they notice that they're under a lot of stress? How would you say someone should navigate that situation?
With personalities that don't get along, I guess
Well, I'm just
there,
curious, like with the whole don't quit your job,
yeah.
you don't quit your job, you quit your,
Your boss.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So I think in some ways, in the position of leadership, you're almost expected to be the adult, right? Like, I need to be able to navigate personalities that I otherwise wouldn't choose to hang out with, and have some self awareness there. But also, yeah, there are personality types that just don't mesh necessarily. And I mean, it's never going to be as simple as, like, yeah, I would stick them on another team. Like, I do think if I want to be in that leadership position and receive that higher amount of compensation and prestige that comes with that, the impetus is on me to get the skill set and build that up myself to be able to work with people that I don't like. And maybe that's easy for me to say as, like, a counselor that's used to having recovering heroin addicts yelling at me. It's like, yeah, you just deal with it. But
Just
I
rolling
think
right off. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you don't take them seriously. They they're saying they're hurt people.
Yeah.
But that is what got me into HR to begin with. Was I think most people have had quote unquote bad bosses, and I think a lot of it really is a lack of leadership development. More often than not, what I see is somebody who was good in their role, their entry or whatever level operations role, and just happened to not quit for a couple of years. It's like, all right, congrats, you're a manager now. It's like, well, what do they know about management? And so I think it's a failing of the organization, lack of leadership development, and not really giving them the skills to be successful in that role to begin with. And so that that's where my jam is, and where I feel like we can make the biggest difference in the lives of the employees is building up those first and second level leaders, giving them the skills, resources, support from higher up to actually be successful in their role. So the employees aren't quitting their bosses and they're not getting burnt out. Um, yeah,
That is
I mean, there's so
brilliant.
much goes into leadership development, but yeah, I think it does take time. It takes resources. It takes money, but it's a lot more expensive to have droves of people quitting and then have to recruit and train and hire new people. So
I I totally so I'm gonna add my 2 cents because I love what you said there, and it's unheard of for me not to add my 2 cents.
It is unheard
Uh, yeah, I
of.
think Heather's like, oh God, if only she just had 1 cent left, that'd be great.
No, no, I
Um,
love it.
I find it really, really, really great when we have um, conversations around how people. I have a lot of leaders out there that do not want to admit that it's because of them that people are quitting, because then they want to put it right back on the employee and be like, well, it's up to them, they should have come talk to me. And I, in a perfect scenario, I agree, like they should 100% be coming to you, having that conversation. But have you built the environment that they feel comfortable enough to have that conversation with you about it? Have you give them the space and the opportunity to find out what it's like to be invulnerable around you? And if you haven't been vulnerable with them, then why would they feel like that would ever be something that was a safe place to do it in? And oh my gosh, can we talk about succession planning one day? Like the money that you're putting into it is nothing compared to the money that you're getting out of succession planning. And that means like if somebody is on the track to want to promote and go further within an organization, why are we not spending the time and money on them to be so successful when they get there and to be that best leader so that they are knowing how to cultivate and look what it looks like to everybody else coming into the organization. They're like, this is amazing. That means I have a future here. Like then you get loyalty, you get buy-in, you get indiscriminate effort put in by employees that don't feel burnout and less likely to feel burnout, I should say, due to the fact that they have a bigger goal in mind. Sorry, I love all of that. So yeah, that's my 50 cents. So yeah.
I don't think it needs to be that expensive. You talked about the cost of succession planning and the resource in that. I mean, it can be as simple as spending an hour once a week meeting with somebody and going, hey, here's some skills that I think would be valuable to you as you grow in this. Let's have you tackle this project, just being kind of strategic in the work that you're assigning them and the debriefs that you have. And so it doesn't have to be sending somebody off to, continuing education class for, X amount of money. It can be, yeah, just being a decent boss.
Being a decent boss and making sure you're standardizing that across the board, like making sure you're allowing everybody that same space to have that same opportunity, I think is really important too. Yeah. Miss Heather, I cut you off again. Go for it.
No, no, no. You're 100% fine. I don't know why I'm just kind of stuck on this whole burnout versus stress, trying to notify, like, help people get out of burnout, because I do think it is difficult
Yeah.
to pull yourself out of a situation when sometimes it really is hopeless, you know? Like you mentioned before, like going through a divorce or moving or something's going on with your kid, and that outlying stress, independent of work,
Mhm.
is actually what I think ends up causing more burnout
Yeah.
than the actual work itself. And so, I don't mean to change it back to this, but this actual like topic really rings true to me, because sometimes it's things that you can't predict and you can't solve for. And so how do you help your employees when their, parent dies or their spouse or their loved ones? I don't know. I just like, I think that sometimes propels burnout more than anything a leadership training can do. What are your thoughts
So
on that?
yeah, I'm I'm almost putting my counselor hat on a bit more than my HR hat at this point, but ultimately I think the most successful thing is going to be helping them to help themselves. Like as a counselor, I've said I won't do the work for you, but I'll do it with you. And so, yeah, as a leader, I definitely want to create an environment where I'm not contributing to the burnout, but you're right. It is so much more than just work. It is life, it is circumstances, it is any situation where the stress and the weight of those circumstances are greater than my current resources and ability to deal with it. And that state is continuous. And so giving people the skills to do something about it. Ultimately, what I found the most successful is being able to take a step back and go, what can I do something about? What can't I do something about? And then moving forward accordingly. Breaking things into bite sized goals, recognizing what I can do and doing something with that, and the stuff that I can't necessarily do anything about, practicing letting go of. Right. So, for example, if I'm trying to get in shape, right? You mentioned yoga and working out and stuff. If I haven't been to the gym, let's say in 10 years, and I want to get in shape, if I go and commit to working out 6 days a week for 3 hours a day, I'm going to fail at that. I might make it to that first workout, maybe, but even that has a huge barrier to entry. Whereas if I'm committing to twice a week, I will go and sit on the exercise bike for 5 minutes, and that's all I'm committing to. I get that sense of accomplishment of I did this. I set out to do something and I accomplished it. Odds are I'll stick around on a little bit longer. I might even do something else, but creating that bite-sized goal that I can feel that sense of accomplishment of I have value, I have self-efficacy, and I'm somebody who follows through on what I do. Those little wins are those things that chip away at the burnout and build us up and give us the skills to not fall further into that. And so how do I help the employees as a leader? Providing that type of information, being somebody that has vulnerability and demonstrates that I don't expect you to be perfect or bulletproof. I'm human as well. I get burnt out too, and sometimes need to take a step back. Um, Understanding where the line is for appropriate self disclosure, where I have two questions that I ask myself. One is, am I telling them this for their sake or for my own sake? Am I just venting for the purpose of complaining,
Interesting.
or am I doing it to help them? And the second question is, does this inhibit their ability to view me as a professional? And as long as those two checks are met to my satisfaction, I'm comfortable disclosing stuff. And so that vulnerability and demonstrating exactly what I just shared. Yeah, I'm going to sit on the exercise bike for 5 minutes and see what happens. Um, Walking the walk.
I actually like that, like starting out slowly, because that's what it is with working out. It's not about working out for 2 hours a day,
Yep.
it's just that 5 minutes. So that's interesting.
I'm a huge proponent of that self-efficacy. By the way, I don't know if y'all are familiar, but it's effectively your belief in your ability to successfully navigate a situation, as opposed to self-esteem, which is like, yeah, I like myself. It's I can get through this. I can do hard things, and so building that up, I think, is huge.
I love the idea of yes, I can do hard things because oftentimes we get there and we're in the middle of it and we forgot how we believed in ourselves at one point that we could do hard things in the middle. So, very important. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Does that help answer your question, Heather? It helped me, so I
No,
just want to
it
check
really
in with
did,
you.
and I like it.
Yeah.
I like how you connected it with working out because that definitely rings. That I always tell people it's like 5 minutes a
Yeah.
day. Just being consistent is the most important part. And so maybe that's kind of the same thing with this. what I'm understanding. It's just being consistent, believing in yourself, and asking for help when you need it.
Absolutely. I would say reducing the barrier to entry as much as possible as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, those bite-sized goals.
So
Awesome.
awesome.
Well, I want to first thank you so much for being on the show. We have had once again another really great conversation, and James, you've been invaluable, and the information you've given us to take away has been great. Any last words or piece of advice for everybody out there?
At the end of the day, no job is worth your own well-being or that of your friends and family, right? Every place we work at existed before I was there. It will exist after I leave, no matter how important I think I am, and this place will fall apart without me. A lot of that is fear and ego, and realistically, only you can advocate for yourself in the way that you need to. I
Mm-hmm.
can't wait for my work to care about my health in the way that I need to for me. And so it's okay to take care of you. You can't give from a well that's empty, is a metaphor I use with my clients. And so I need to refill that well. I need to fill it back up so that way I can show up as the employee, the counselor, the boss, whatever I happen to be that the people in my life deserve. And so take care of you so you can be there for others.
It's fantastic.
I love
Miss
it.
Heather?
I mean, I think James put it in a beautiful little box. There's nothing I can add to that.
I concur. So we're going to end on that wonderful note. And again, please listen to us. And oh, that was the other thing I was supposed to tell everybody. Please do rate us. There was a comment to me that was made that I should at least mention that if you do rate us, we'd appreciate it. 5-star. But if it's,
Please let us know how we can improve. I love
I
feedback.
would love that. Yes, for sure. But anyway, I do recall any place that you are getting your podcast, please do listen and have a great day. So happy Friday, and we'll talk to you guys later. Thanks again, James.
Thank you.